In this section, I want to look at circles. Let's start with the standard form of a circle. So there are a couple of different forms of circles. Standard and general are the ones we're going to look at. Standard form is by far the most useful because it gives us a lot of information directly. So standard form, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And like I said, it gives us two things directly, the center and the radius of the circle. The center being the point hk and the radius being r. So minor adjustments pulling it out of the formula x minus h comes out as a positive, y minus k, the k switches signs as well, and then the radius is just r, not r squared. So if we look at an example of this, let's take the equation x minus 2 squared plus y minus, let's do plus 4 squared equals 9. You can see that the center is going to be the point 2, negative 4, just pulling it out as the opposite signs. And the radius will be the square root of 9, which is 3. From this, we could very easily get a graph, go to the point 2, negative 4, go out 3 in any direction, and we will have, it should be a little lower, we'll have our circle drawn pretty quickly. But what if it's non-standard form? So one of the other forms is called general form. And that looks like x squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0. Or it could be in some indeterminate form where it's not in standard or general. Either way, we need to be able to find the center and the radius. In order to do that, this general form really does nothing for us. We need to put it into standard form. And the way we're going to do that, I'm going to use completing the square. Complete the square to put into the standard form. So let's look at that. Let's remember how to do completing the square. So let's take the equation x squared plus y squared plus 2x minus 6y minus 2 equals 0. So remember the standard form, x plus or minus something in parentheses squared plus y plus or minus something in parentheses squared equals our r squared. We're really curious about these two values, the center points and then the radius. But what we notice, this thing here is it's a perfect square. So we need to put this in perfect squares on the x's and the y's. We do that using completing the square. So the first thing I'm going to do to complete the square, I'm going to rearrange this equation so that I have my x terms together, the x squared plus 2x. But what I'm also going to do, I'm going to leave a little plus blank right in there, and we'll deal with that in a minute. Then I have my plus y squared minus 6y, and I'm going to have the same plus, leave a blank in there. Everything that wasn't an x or a y, meaning that 2, I'm going to shift that over to the other side, and then I'm going to have the 2 blanks over there as well to keep the equation balanced, because what I'm about to do to complete the square, I'm going to add something into those first 2 blanks, and if I add it to the left-hand side, I have to add it to the right-hand side as well. Now let's fill in those little spaces there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take half of that center number on the x, which is the 2. Half of 2 is 1. I'm going to square that. I'm going to take half of the y term, the negative 6. Half of negative 6 is negative 3 squared. I'm going to keep those numbers inside parentheses to keep the signs, really pay attention to the signs, it'll make it easier. And I do want to keep the signs at this point because that's going to make it easier in the next step. The other thing you might be saying, well, 1 squared negative 3 squared isn't really hard to do in one step. 1 squared is just 1, 3 squared is 9. I've gone ahead and put those into the second 2 blanks on the right-hand side. So why did I bother to leave it as 1 and negative 3 squared on the left-hand side? Well, it's going to make it, again, easier in the next step when I actually go to complete the square. So I've left it as 1 squared on the left-hand side, negative 3 squared on the left-hand side, and gone ahead and squared it as 1 and 9, 2 blanks on the right-hand side. So now, because I've chosen those numbers in exactly that way, I can go ahead and rewrite this whole x grouping as x plus 1 squared, x plus 1 in parentheses. The y's I can write as y minus 3 in parentheses squared. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, I can add 2, 1, and 9 together to get 12. So how did that happen so quickly there? Well, this is a perfect square. If we were to take that, square it back out or FOIL it back out, you'd square the first term, the x squared, you'd square the last term, the 1 squared, and then you'd multiply the 2 and double it to get the center, which is the 2x. Same thing on the y's, y, we get y squared. Negative 3, we get the negative 3 squared root of 9. And then we double the middle terms, the negative 6. And so now we have our standard form of a circle. From this, we can get the center to be negative 1, 3. Again, pulling these out as the opposite sign. And the radius would be the square root of 12, which can't find it exactly. We can simplify that a little bit. It's 2 square roots of 3. Let's do one more example. This time I'm going to not really write it in standard or general form. I'm just going to mix it up a little bit. So normally for general form, the x squareds and y squareds follow right after each other. Point being, I can take any equation. If we have that positive x squared, positive y squared, I can go through my completing the squared in order to get my standard form. So I've gone ahead and gotten my x terms together. I'm now getting my y terms together, leaving my blanks after the x and y. I'm going to move that 1 over to the right hand side as a negative 1. And now I'm going to go ahead and figure out what I need to put in those blanks to complete the square. So half of 3 is 3 halves. I square that. Half of negative 1, negative 1 half. I'm going to square that. 3 squared, 9, and 2 squared is 4. So 3 over 2 squared is 9 fourths. Negative is going to square out to be a positive. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So now I can complete the square. I'm going to have x plus 3 halves first squared, and then y minus 1 half squared equals. Now I need to have a common denominator between the negative 1, the 9 halves, and 1 fourth. Negative 1, 9 fourths, and 1 fourth. Common denominator is 4, so negative 1 is negative 4 fourths. So that'll give me 6 fourths when I put all of that together. And finally, if I want to pull out my center and my radius, my center is negative 3 halves, my y center is 1 half, and then my radius will be the square root of 6 over 4. Once again, I can simplify this a little bit. Square root of 6 can't do anything with, but the square root of 4 is 2.